Görüşürüz.
Okay, so first I'd like to welcome you all. Thank you for being here to commemorate the 28th anniversary of the Srebrenica genocide. Today I'm going to take you through a number of different things. My name's Melissa, I'm going to be your MC. We're going to start off with some speakers, watch some more videos, and then have a Q&A session at the very end where we invite everybody to ask any questions they may have that they've gleaned throughout the program. To start off with, I would also like to acknowledge the land that we're on today. So the Bosnian Canadian community wants to acknowledge the importance of the lands where we all live, work, and play, and honor this tradition of territory acknowledgement that dates back centuries for Indigenous peoples. We are on traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations. Okay, so to introduce our first speaker today, we have Lamia Hodjic. Lamia is a Surrey school teacher who has found purpose in sharing her family's stories as refugees and survivors of the Bosnian genocide.
In Bosnia, you will find a kind of quiet and stillness. And in that stillness, you'll hear a whisper. Every tree, every blade of grass, and even the ants and birds sing the names of our dead. Bosnia is an oasis of rolling hills and running rivers, but even our most beautiful landscapes are soaked with the blood of our martyrs. Even after they have silenced us all, our mountains will bellow their names. Srebrenica is the shame of the international world. Bosnia is plagued by an unforgivable and inconceivable betrayal. With the watchful permission of the Dutch-led UN peacekeepers, Serbian troops massacred over 8,000 boys and men in one night in Srebrenica. Their remains are still being uncovered. I find myself reliving the things people in Srebrenica and in the rest of my country went through during the war. I think about what they endured, what pain they experienced, and the fear they must have felt at the hands of people who hated us for nothing more than twisted lies, a story they created in their history books. Even though I was just a baby during the Bosnian genocide, the pains of war will always live through me. However, there are times when, as survivors, we feel reluctant to share our stories so as not to burden others with our trauma. My people have been taught that our story is not important. Our people's very lives seemed of little significance to the international community. Our aggressors committed inhumane acts upon women and children while the world looked on. The political chess game proved more important than our lives. And still, as a survivor, I know that it is my purpose and my obligation to speak for every child that was taken too soon. In 1993, my family fled to Canada. This was shortly after my father was released from Serb-run concentration camps in our hometown, BiH. It is both my blessing and curse to be able to stand here in front of you today and share my story. I am plagued with the guilt of survival. And oftentimes I am overwhelmed with anger over the injustices my people have endured. For not only did they live through hell, many must now live amongst the very monsters that led them there. When I look at my mother, I am reminded of the fear she felt when she pressed a 1-year-old me into her chest in that overcrowded bus, next to young men drenched in sweat, afraid it was their turn next. My mama prayed I wasn't dead, but she was too afraid to even check. And so, I can't help but ask why. Why us? Why my people? But then, I am reminded that there are others around the world who have suffered and hold a similar memory. The indigenous people around the world, Palestinians, Black Americans, the list goes on. And I remember in some twisted form of comfort that we are not alone in our pain. I am reminded that the very essence of a human being is to have empathy. Living in a country like Canada has given myself and those of us here today an opportunity to meet people we may have not met before. And for that, I am so grateful. I am honored I can hear their stories and respect their truths, and in exchange, share ours. As a teacher, I firmly believe in the power of education, spreading awareness and speaking for those who have continuously been silenced will make us loud enough to finally be significant. As a survivor of these unspeakable atrocities, I know the importance of building community and making connections. I am grateful to be amongst many amazing people here today, and I look forward to the opportunity to support one another in new ways to come. To those of you here today, thank you for honoring our martyrs. In the name of God, we will never forget them, and for them, we will never be silenced. I'd like to leave you all with a quote from our beloved President, Alija Izetbegović Rahmet. I believe that the people, instead of pretty lies, should be told the truth, no matter how ugly it may be. What can we do? Destiny hasn't been kind to us, but with the help of God, we will prevail. Thank you.
Take a minute, in whichever way you like, religious, however you feel so, take a moment of silence to remember the victims and honor their sacrifice.
Anniversary of Srebrenica genocide, in which over 8,000 Bosniaks were killed. This year, the incomplete remains of 30 more victims were buried. The youngest was 15 and the oldest 65.
Ovo je moj brat. Ja 95. jesam bila zajedno krenula, on ušla se oceče po šumi i još autobusom je tu i sad sam se ovdje opet našla.
Kopavam svog rođaka Šamana, koji je ubijen u selu Brošević.
The commemoration was also attended by a member of the presidency of Bosnia and Herzegovina, Denis Bećirović, the Turkish Minister of Family and Social Policy, Mahinur Ozdemir, the High Representative of the International Community in Bosnia and Herzegovina, Christian Schmidt, and the US Ambassador, Michael Murphy.
Koji god je genocid počinio, ne interesuje me koja je vjera, interesuje me samo da kažete gdje su kosti, da dostojanstveno sve kosti kompletne ukopamo.
On July 11, 1995, the military forces of Republika Srpska occupied Srebrenica, which was at that time the UN protected zone.
Je bila meta sve što može granata da pomoći.
On the next day, they occupied Potočari, where the UN Protection Force base was located. There, they started separating men and boys.
Mi smo tu cijelu noć preveli na tom kamionu. Čuli se jaki krici oko nas, briska, čujete samo pomaganje čovjeka, brisak, nemoj me tući, nemoj me ovako, nemoj me klati.
In the following, civilians were tortured, murdered, and raped en masse, and over 30,000 women, children, and elderly men were expelled from the region.
For our next speaker, I'd like to invite Nismet Nezic, a survivor of one of the concentration camps, to share his story.
Thank you very much. Thank you for coming here to be here with us tonight. And what speaks to me, how I followed that 15 years ago. And at that time, it took me several weeks to write that because I just couldn't deal with emotions. And 30 years after camp and 17 years after that first speech, I went to say anything, just couldn't write anything. So I decided to maybe read little fragments from the last speech and talk a little bit more about some things. This is part of the speech that I wrote 17 years ago. My speech tonight is titled, I'm Survivor of Self-Concentration Camp. The last few weeks were very emotional to me because I was faced with two challenges at the same time. The first challenge is to attempt to translate into words what the title of this speech really means and feel like to us survivors. My second challenge was to deal with unavoidable relieving of the torture and suffering I and my compatriots were subject to into the concentration camps all over Bosnia during the whole length of the war. Every time I tried for the past several nights, my thoughts wandered away, memories become too real and painful. I again felt the Chetnik's baseball bats beating on my back like it happened yesterday. And I went through these same emotions just last few weeks. I tried to write a new speech and just couldn't. I was arrested on June 2nd, 1992, while hiding in a forest near my birthplace together with 5 of my friends. Immediately after the first contact with Chetniks, we realized they had no humanity in themselves. They tied their hands behind their backs and started beating. At one moment, one of the Chetniks grabbed me for my hair, pulled a long knife from his boot, placed it on my throat, swore at me and said, "What are you going to do now? I am about to decapitate you." All I could do was look at his eyes and calmly say, "The knife is in your hand, do what you want." As if someone put a thought in my head that he was seeking pleasure in my fear. Then his commander calmly swore at him and said, "Leave them alone, you know we need them alive," and I was scared. I arrived at Manager camp on June 12th. I was surprised by the number of Bosniaks who were already there. Over the next few months, over 4,000 people turned in over 4,000 walking skeletons. We were given so little food that in just 2 months, we lost 20 to 40 kilograms in average. At the times, we went without water for days. And even when we got it, 4 of us had to share 1 cup. In addition to hunger and thirst, we were tortured many other ways. We were beaten with baseball bats wrapped in barbed wires, and inch-thick electrical cables with metal balls attached on the ends a device specially created for torture. They cut our skins with knives, cut our ears off, our genitals, leaving us to bleed helplessly. They threw hand grenades in rooms full of prisoners. They randomly and aimlessly shot burst of automatic rifle to the windows, killing and wounding dozens at a time. They used bulldozers to load corpses onto trucks for transport to destinations unknown. Today, we know where they are. Teams of international forensic experts are still excavating mass graves of my people of all ages and both genders. Sometimes they force us inmates to load their dead friends on the trucks. I had to do it myself. One of the corpses I loaded had a slit throat, another had a punctured heart. But the image that will never leave me, and I said that 17 years ago, and I still mean it, is one of the dead inmates with his eyes still open and a cigarette butt extinguished in his right eye. Your lives are worth less than our bullets, they kept telling us, so they killed and tortured us with knives, baseball bats, electricity, hunger and thirst. They compete and inventing harder ways for Bosniaks to die. They took virtually everything from us except our faith and pride. This is just a glimpse of the horror Bosniaks endured in Manjeća, Omarska and Keretel, three of the largest concentration camps in Bosnia and Herzegovina, known to the whole world. They are known to the world thanks to Mr. Roy Gutman, an American journalist who risked his own life to disclose the existence of those camps. Many of us present here today are alive because of his decision to act at high risk. Therefore, I'd like to take this opportunity again to thank Mr. Gutman on behalf of all survivors of these concentration camps present here and wherever they are today in the world. This is just a little part. If somebody wants to read the whole speech, they can just Google my name and you'll find it. We are here to talk about genocide in Srebrenica that happened in 1995. And many of them keep saying it's not genocide or just it's an act of few people. That genocide started even before in 1992. They planned this way in advance. And how we know that? Take Ključ, where I'm from. But they captured us, put in the camps, took all the weapons we had, knowing that there is no more men with any weapons to defend. They cut communication with all the villages, and then they would come to a village. They did that on my own, and send few people to surrounding villages to tell everybody to come next day, 10 o'clock, to sign loyalty to Serbo Publica, and they guaranteed to live peacefully. Nothing will happen to them. Some of them believed, and they came. There was a few hundred of them gathered in front of an old school. When the Serbs opened their trucks, showed the machine guns and started killing all of them. My 15-year-old cousin survived that. He was shorter than the rest of them, fell first, and the dead people fell on him. So he waited till dark to crawl under dead people and go home. Next few days, they repeat same in BiH, where Hayrudin is from. The dark village, knowingly full, there is nobody to fight. They killed over 250 people in one morning. Next was Prvo, same thing again. They killed almost everybody. This time, not just men, children and women. One of my friends, that's his picture there, his name is Senad Medanovic. They killed 42 members of his family. His sister was 19. She was poured gasoline on and then burned alive. So, you tell me they didn't plan that. You tell me the genocide is just in Srebrenica. A whole Bosnia is genocide. And a whole Bosnia is a shame for international community. They took a right to defend themselves. They didn't give us weapons. They put arms embargo. They sentenced us to die. They were telling us to give up because it's better to give up than fight and die. We had no chance. It pained me so deeply watching war in Ukraine now and seeing how they prize them calling them heroes, giving them everything they want, all the weapons. Yet to us, they didn't give anything. They didn't let us even buy. We had people, 3, 4, lining behind one gun, waiting for the person in front to die so they can take his gun and keep fighting. They never called us heroes. They never apologized. But yet, Ukrainian people are heroes, and they are. Don't think wrong. They are heroes. They're fighting for the land, but we had the same right, and it was taken from us. So that's why we cannot forget. We're not allowed to forget what happened to us. We have to educate your young people, and I'm so pleased to have here today for young people like Lamia, Melissa. This is a future generation. We have to, no matter how hard it is for us survivors, we have to tell our kids. They have to know why we are here. We cannot forget Srebrenica. Never. Thank you.
Preživjela sam genocid, u genocidu mi je ubijeno 22 člana moje uže familije. Moj sin bio posebno dobro dijete, bio je dobar učenik, volio je život, volio je matematiku, volio je svoje drugove i prijatelje iskreno, međutim, sudbina je sve učinila.
Ima moje dva brata. 2013. sam ukopala 2 kosti od jedne noge, a moj sin imao i leđa, i glavu, i ruke, i karlicu. Od toga još nema ništa, još se nije to pronašlo.
Da i ona jednim dijelom može. Imam 3 unučadi, monale, bake, dužne da uradimo nešto dok smo žive, da ne ostavljamo našoj djeci teret na leđu. I moramo učiti iz prošlosti. Čovjek bez prošlosti ne može biti čovjek budućnosti.
We still hear up to today people denying the genocide, people saying that it did not happen. The United Nations was founded on the promise of never again. This promise is difficult to keep, but we must keep trying.
A sad imam 79. I nisam još se umorila i još se borim. I nastavit ću. U ime pravde, u ime čovječnosti.
Poruka svim majkama svijeta. Kad rodite novo biće, pokušajte da ga odgojite u ljubavi, jer ste ga u ljubavi rodili. Da vole i da budu voljeni i da nikad nikome ne nanesu neki bol.
Selma Porta was born in Banja Luka, Bosnia. During the aggression on Bosnia, Selma and her family became refugees. They spent most of the war in Sarajevo, while it was under siege. In 1999, they emigrated to the United States, where she attended the University of Washington. She holds a Bachelor's of Business Administration with a major in accounting and a Master's of Professional Accounting with a major in tax. Selma's experience as a refugee contributed greatly to her community activism and her unwavering commitment to social responsibility. She has served and currently serves on boards of several nonprofit organizations. Selma worked in the public accounting sector for over a decade, between PwC and Deloitte. In April of last year, she decided to leave the public accounting world when she accepted the position of Executive Director at the Congress of Bosniaks of North America. Welcome, Selma.
Thank you for the kind introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. Before I begin, I would like to thank the Bosnian and Herzegovinian Cultural Center of Vancouver, BC for organizing this important event and for inviting the Congress of Bosniaks of North America to participate in this important conversation. This week marked 28 years since the Srebrenica genocide. This week, 28 years later, 30 more bodies were found, exhumed, identified, and finally laid to rest in Potočari Cemetery in Srebrenica. This week, a mother hugged the coffin of her son and told him, "I am so sorry, my beautiful child. I could not protect you." This week, the late Halil, a 19-year-old killed during the genocide, was buried in the form of one bone, the only remains that were found of him. This week was hard, because each of those 30 victims could have been us. Could have been our children, our brothers, our fathers, our grandfathers. The youngest victim buried this week was 15 years old. To give some context for those of you who may not be familiar with the aggression on Bosnia and Herzegovina, allow me to provide a bit more background. On March 1st, 1992, Bosnia and Herzegovina citizens voted for the country's independence from the Republic of Yugoslavia. This was following the Declaration of Independence by Slovenia and Croatia. Serbia, who inherited most of Yugoslavia's infrastructure, wanted to keep the republic alive in order to achieve their goal of building a greater Serbia, a nation-building plan which would allow all Serbs to be united as one nation. To achieve this, Yugoslavia, known today as Serbia, attacked all three nations in a power grab. While Slovenia and Croatia could resist the occupation, Bosnia was quickly placed under an unfair arms embargo, which crippled its defenses. Serbia took advantage of this, sending paramilitary forces and organizing Bosnian Serbs to attack the country with the intent to absorb Bosnia and to eliminate its non-Serb population. Croatia did the same, but eventually joined Bosnia in defense against Serbs and Serbia. Bosnian Serb military and Serbian paramilitary forces killed, raped, tortured, and exterminated non-Serbs all around Bosnia and Herzegovina between 1992 and 1995. This resulted in convictions of Bosnian Serb and Serbian officials on counts of war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide. The mass murders in Srebrenica started on July 11, 1995, and lasted until July 22, 1995. In this period, 8,372 men and boys were killed and buried in mass graves, a culmination of the systematic killings that occurred all over the country, resulted in tragedy which would be labeled as the worst atrocity on European soil since the end of the Holocaust, the Srebrenica genocide. The town of Srebrenica was declared a safe zone or safe area by the UN in 1993, together with Tuzla, Gorazde, Žepa, Sarajevo, and BiH. It was declared a safe zone in order to try and stop indiscriminate shelling of the cities and killing of innocent civilians, mostly Bosniaks, by the Bosnian Serb army. Sadly, those safe areas quickly became the most dangerous places on earth. Over the years, we've heard the horrific stories of what took place in those safe areas, and in particular in Srebrenica, that cold July of '95. Babies murdered right after being born, men tortured and treated like animals, forced to watch as their families were mutilated and murdered, people burned alive, people impaled and left as warnings to others of what is to come. After murdering over 8,300 men and boys, Serb military and Serbian paramilitary forces had to get rid of the massive number of bodies. They dug mass graves and buried dozens of people in each grave. When the international community noticed what was going on using satellite imaging and sent teams of experts to investigate, the Serb military dug up those bodies using excavators and other machinery and buried them in secondary and tertiary graves to cover up their crimes. International experts had to exhume the remains, assemble human bodies scattered across multiple mass graves like puzzles in order to collect the mountain of evidence that would result in the designation of genocide for Srebrenica. To give you an idea of the horrific situation the experts found upon arrival to Bosnia, I will read a short excerpt from the book Grave Faces, written by Robert McNeil, one of the forensic technicians tasked with examining the remains of victims exhumed from mass graves around Srebrenica and other safe areas. Mr. McNeil examined hundreds of bodies. In this passage, he describes the first time he saw one of the refrigerators where they kept the bodies to slow the decay in order to collect as much evidence as possible. The conditions were awful. They had no way of giving respect to the dead, given the volume of bodies they were dealing with. And I quote, "She pulled out a set of keys from her pocket and unlocked the heavy padlock, pushed her foot against the door, and heaved on the iron lever, which opened the door with a loud sucking sound. When the door opened, the deafening sound of the generator inside echoed, disorienting me. It took a moment or two before I could focus on the contents inside the gloomy container. Dozens upon dozens of body bags were piled on top of one another. I was shocked. In my 30 years of working with the dead, I had never seen anything like it. The once white plastic bags were filthy on the outside, and many had been split open by razor-sharp, broken human bones. The floor underneath them was awash with black, smelly fluid." End quote. Mr. McNeil was one of dozens of experts from around the world who examined the bodies, collected the evidence, and in the process ensured it was incontrovertible, unbiased, and to the highest professional standards. The evidence gathered by these experts secured the ruling of genocide for Srebrenica. Many of the graves around other safe areas were sadly never found, because very few Serb locals came forward and admitted to the location of the mass graves, fearing for their own safety or the safety of family and friends who participated in the mass killings. Some of the mass graves from other parts of Bosnia that were found were unfortunately not found in time. Murders there happened earlier in the war. As such, it made it much more difficult to collect forensic evidence and prove what had happened in those cities. The evidence was lost to time while the world watched. Genocide is the deliberate killing of a large number of people from a particular nation or ethnic group with the aim of destroying that nation or ethnic group. It seems obvious then that all of the facts above demonstrate that genocide was perpetrated on Bosniaks as an ethnic group all around Bosnia, culminating in Srebrenica. That is not a foreign concept to Canadians. Canadian government officials earlier this year took additional steps in reconciliation through reparations for harm done to Indigenous people through a system of mandatory residential schools that has been called cultural genocide. The Canadian government has taken several steps thus far to ensure they correct the harm that was inflicted on Indigenous populations over a period of 100 years. Canada is demonstrating how to reconcile in order to. In Bosnia, sadly, the situation seems to get worse by the day. Bosnian Serb officials at the highest levels of government openly deny the genocide in Srebrenica. Serb nationalist leaders regularly offend victims and incite Serb nationalists to terrorize returnees, all with the aim of ensuring Bosniaks never return to the lands they were expelled from. all under the watchful eye of the international community, issuing statement after statement, but not taking any firm steps in punishing and deterring the disrespect of victims, of facts, and of truth. I would like to use this opportunity to urge every one of you to seek Canadian involvement and expertise on these issues in Bosnia. I urge every one of you to call on Canadian officials to open an embassy in Sarajevo so they can keep a watchful eye on the situation on the ground, as Bosnia is again vulnerable and currently in the worst political crisis since the end of the war. As we sit comfortably in this theater, thousands of miles away and almost 3 decades away from the victims of the Srebrenica genocide, it can be hard to answer the question, why should we care? Why should an average Canadian remember Srebrenica? Because the world shouts never again, yet over and over again, we see the same alarming patterns repeating themselves. I survived the UN safe area of Sarajevo. I have seen the bloodshed firsthand. I was a target of the shelling and the snipers as a 6-year-old girl whose childhood was swallowed by the vortex of genocide. I was classified as lesser than, branded because I was Muslim. My family and I were discriminated against in every sphere of life, from education to jobs. I was dehumanized, like so many Bosniak men and women, girls and boys, so we would be easier to abuse and torture and assault and murder. Through an organized and systematic genocidal campaign, I was forcefully expelled from my home. I was victim to Serb nationalist propaganda, which painted me as a traitor to the Christian faith, a Turk, and a dirty Muslim. I witnessed the preparations around me that would result in genocide on my people. I was fortunately young enough to be left off of death lists, drawn up in order to remove Bosniak intellectuals, politicians, professors, anyone who could organize the masses, anyone who could sound the alarm and warn the people of what was to come. If we allow the forces of hate, discrimination, and othering to thrive in our communities anywhere, my fate could be yours. That is why it matters to each and every one of us. That is why we must not forget. In the words of the great and late Martin Luther King Jr., injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Never forget the Srebrenica genocide. Never forget the mothers of Srebrenica who lost entire families and were left completely alone in this world. Their noble fight for justice must become ours. Let us send a message that they are not alone, that we will remember. Thank you for your time, and God bless you.
Thank you to everybody. I'd like to invite the speakers from today to come back up to the front, and I'd like to open up a discussion for anybody that has any questions for any of them.
Ima liko pitanje od vas za našu gošću ili nas?
I have a question for Lamina. Since you were just a baby during the war, how and why are you so passionate about talking about the Bosnian genocide?
Thank you for your question. So, why am I passionate about the genocide? I'd like to say it's thanks to my parents. My mom and my dad made a point to teach me about what happened to our people, to them. And it's a difficult lesson, and it's a hard thing to tell a child like your age, but it's important to know the truth. My parents took time teaching me the history of Bosnia, you know, who we are, that we were elite, who existed before the Ottomans, before the Austro-Hungarian Empire. They taught me the importance of knowing who I am, being proud to be Bosnian. And after you learn all of this, there's no other way than to be passionate, right? So I hope that the young kids here today can also find some purpose in talking about the truth and not forgetting for our shaheed.
Hoćeš mikrofon?
Dođi ovdje. Dobro, izvijeni se.
Mogu da na naš, mogu.
Ne znam, engleski izvijeni.
Jesam, bio sam. Malo prijema. Bio sam u Srebrenici i baš što tamo kaže naš narod, Srebrenica je drugi Haš. Da, i stvarno jeste, svaki poslanec i Hercegovac treba vidi Srebrenicu. Jako žalost. Meni je stvarno drago što sam bio tamo i da sam vidio to uživo i šta? Eto, to je to što ja imam da kažem.
Thank you. This question can go to anybody, but what is it that most places online refer to Srebrenica as a massacre? Can you repeat it?
I heard the question, and I'll repeat it. So why is it that most places online refer to Srebrenica as a massacre rather than genocide, which is the legal term that we should be using? It's a great question. It was actually a discussion that I recently had with a gentleman who oversees the page for Srebrenica massacre. I brought up the question to the Wikipedia editor and asked, this is not the correct terminology to use, it should be a genocide. Why is it listed as a massacre? And he said, Wikipedia pulls data from Google, and on Google, the more commonly used term to describe what happened in Srebrenica is Srebrenica massacre. What does that mean? It means that most of the content online is referring to it wrong. A lot of people are writing press releases, essays, articles, posts, referring to it as massacre rather than its correct term, which is genocide. I think if you Google in quotation marks Srebrenica massacre, you'll get about 280,000 hits on Google. If you Google Srebrenica genocide in quotation marks, you'll get about 230,000 hits. So most places will actually use the more frequently occurring term online rather than the correct legal term, and they don't care because their systems are designed to just pull whatever is on the internet. So I encourage all of you to help us change that. Write about Srebrenica in whatever form. Use hashtags, call it Srebrenica genocide, write posts on your Facebook pages when you're sharing things. Make sure that you're using the correct term, and let's get that number up so that the more commonly used term is Srebrenica genocide. Great question.
Done over the past year or so to ensure that Srebrenica is not forgotten?
Thank you for that question. So I'll start maybe with July of last year. We worked with Remembering Srebrenica's ambassador, Robert McNeil, the gentleman I mentioned, who wrote Brave Faces, a forensic technician's reporting on what had happened through his experience. We did a book promotion activity where we tried to get his book out there for people to know his story because it's extremely important. We worked with Sisterhood of Salam and Shalom, which is a group of a pretty powerful organization in the United States of Jewish and Muslim women who are working on reconciliation. And so we did a Srebrenica commemoration event with them as well to reach an even bigger audience. We this year attended 4 different commemoration ceremonies, this being one of them. We were also present in New York, in Des Moines, and in Chicago, where you might have seen over 1,000 people were out marching thanks to an organization by 2 wonderful local organizations, Lilies of Hope, urging youth to interview their family members, their aunts, uncles, grandfathers, whoever they have about what they went through during the Bosnian War, and to turn that into an educational project that they can present at a library, at a museum, at a school. That way we can reach outside of our own communities and reach into the communities that we live in and are a part of, so that we can get our stories out there and explain to people why it's important in today's day and age to remember what happened in Srebrenica, because we still see some of the same ideologies in the United States with the far right. And I'm not sure about Canada, but I think it's something that we're seeing rise around the world. So I hope I got everything. I'm sure there was other stuff in there, but that is one of the pillars of our mission. Remembrance is extremely important to our organization, and we're going to keep working at it. So thank you for the question.
So I have a question for you. So you just touched on this, but what's something that people can do to get involved to reach a larger audience? I think, and particularly the younger group, and the people who really have the power and may have not experienced things firsthand.
That's another great question. I'll use an example of what one of our students did in the project, if that's okay, if that's what you were kind of asking. One of our students, I was sort of surprised, created a documentary video and she posted it on TikTok. And I don't use TikTok. I think that's like the younger generation. I grew up on Facebook. And so TikTok, I don't even have an account. She said that she was able to get 96,000 views on her video with over 7,000 likes. That's one video, one student. How many of you have TikTok? I mean, I would like to see the young people. That's incredible reach. Online, social media, using your platforms online, especially nowadays. But I would also say connecting with your local communities, local Holocaust museums, local museums focused on genocide remembrance, doing presentations, doing roundtables, having these discussions, because you'll be shocked what kind of ideas come out of these conversations that can really make a difference. That answers it.
Okay, so let's go back to terminology, massacre and genocide. Maybe we should take more description about those 2 terminologies. Why is not massacre, why is genocide? We should say that massacre is not necessarily planned. Genocide it is planned. So at least we have 4 different stages of genocide. Number 1, planning. Number 2, organizing. Number 3, execution. And number 4, denying. So when we take all 4 of them, 3 are gone. We still have denying of genocide. So we're still living that genocide. And my question is, just let's go back to the planning. There is one during the during the process of Ratko Mladić and Ratko Mladić, people probably don't know that just take one truth, that 138 bus were organizing in town of Ulica, let's say July 14, 1995, to take the captured Bosnians from one location to another location, to take them to the execution field. It's called Kravica, you know very well. Over 1,500 men were executed in some kind of farm, Kravica. So, my question is, what you are doing regarding this fourth stage, denying genocide, especially in the United States of America and of course in Canada as well, as an organization?
It's a great question. So I think the one big thing, and I kind of mentioned it, but I flew through earlier, I'm going to repeat again, in DC, in Canada, in anywhere else, to continue educating to counter denial. One of the other things that we did earlier this year, and that we got quite a bit of, attacked for, was you guys may have heard about Boris Malagurski and his film Srpska, The Struggle for Freedom. It was touring all around the United States, and there was one venue in the US that was not a church, and it was an Irish American Heritage Center in Chicago. And we reached out to them and we said, this is who you're dealing with, this is what this story is about. As Irish Americans, you should not be allowing this sort of ultra-nationalist propaganda to be shown to American audiences. And they canceled their showing. That was the biggest sort of showing that we were able to cancel. Remaining were all churches, and unfortunately, because they were all Serbian Orthodox churches, there was not an ability, they would not accept actually canceling the showings of the films. We did email letters and mail letters to every single mayor of every single city where the showings were happening in Canada and in the United States, to make sure that they know that there's ultra-nationalist propaganda being shown to their citizens and that they need to take that as a national security risk.
I just want to ask a question. Our people are so, how can I say, this community is so, everyone's so scared, you know, like, we all need to come together and bring our family, bring our brothers, bring our sisters together and be as one. All the communities, all the people, we want your support because we can't do this without you. She's talking about TikTok, you know, our generation, like me, like our generation, basically, we gotta come together, you know. Nothing works without everyone coming together. We need your support. Thank you.
That is all for questions. I just want to take a moment again to, I don't know.
Okay, I'll try. Since you are a teacher and in Canadian school, is the Srebrenica genocide part of Canadian school curriculum at all, or are they planning to do, or is there anything that we can do?
So the way that the BC curriculum is organized is teachers have the autonomy to teach whatever information they want. So you should cover some genocide and understand those concepts and those themes so that children can analyze and critically think for themselves when they hear things on the news and so on. So I actually studied history. I have yet to teach history at school. But when I do, inshallah, I will teach the Bosnian genocide and Srebrenica genocide. It's up to the teachers.
Last minute questions? Okay. So I'd like to thank all of our speakers here, for all this way, Lamia and as well aspect. I'd like to thank you guys for sharing your stories. I'd like to thank all of you for showing up. Obviously, this wouldn't have been able to take place if there was nobody here to create a community and to listen to all these wonderful speakers. So thank you, and we hope to see you guys again next year.
Znaš kako on došao radi? On došao nije da čeka. Nema leji. Ja mislim da ona ima jedan. Good. Dobro, mašala. Dobro. Very good. Oh? Merhaba. Merhaba. Zadovoljstvo je malo.